Hey everybody, welcome back to Gaijin Gaiden. And I know it's been a while. I've just been really busy with various things. Uh, but today I kind of wanted to shift gears. Previously with the channel, I have really kind of avoided talking too much about political or social issues here in Japan, just because why wade into that quagmire? But recently there was something that happened here that I kind of feel like a real desire to talk about. So the other week, there was a sumo event happening, and the mayor of this town, up around I think it was in Kyoto, uh, was giving a speech when he kind of collapsed, and some people rushed over to help him and climbed into the ring, and some people from the audience and started to give him medical aid. The thing is though that some of these people were women. Now, if you don't know, women are not allowed to set foot inside of a sumo ring. This is a very ancient and old-timey custom, just because of, to put it bluntly, a lot of the ritual part of sumo is tied up in Shintoism. And Shintoism is very big on purity, and to put it bluntly, in terms of rituality, if that's actually a word, women are considered impure in some circumstances, such as standing and getting into a sumo ring. While those women were attempting to giving the mayor aid, someone, a referee, a judge, it's the translation of the term has been a little different depending on where I've read about this. Got on the PA system and said, "Would the women kindly please leave the ring?" Of course, and there were even apparently a few people in the audience who kind of commented like, "Hey, those women aren't supposed to be in the ring." And the mayor, fortunately, was taken to the hospital where he was later okay. Wow, excuse me. Where he was okay, and he did thank the women who helped him. And then later on, there were some reports that, like immediately after the mayor was taken out of there and everyone left the ring, some officials ran out there and started throwing around salt, which is used in purification rituals. Now that, as far as I know, hasn't been confirmed. But it is like undeniable that somebody got on the PA and asked the women to get out of the ring, even though they were in the middle of helping to administer first aid to a man who had just collapsed. And this was pretty big news. I mean, here in Japan, I saw articles about it online from like the New York Times and the Washington Post. And pretty much universally, everybody said, well, this is ridiculous. What were they supposed to do? Just not do that because this guy, and just let this guy die. And in all fairness, the general reaction here in Japan has been, this is stupid. There's no good reason to have acted like that. In fact, the man in charge of Japan's Sumo Association, like just after all of this happened, he made a public announcement saying, like, no, we're very grateful to these women for coming in there and helping the mayor out. Um, the thing is, though, that oddly enough, the same day, in a coincidence, there was another sumo event going on that was basically like kids sumo. There's some kids, elementary school age kids, were going to come and get to practice and mess around with, seeing what it's like to be sumo wrestlers at an event with some actual sumo wrestlers. And one of the people in charge of that, or I'm sorry, like a senior wrestler who was called up the people who were in charge of that and basically said, like, hey, make sure you don't let the girls into the ring. Now, again, it's pretty unlikely that he was aware of the situation with the mayor at the time, and it just happening on the same day is just a truly unfortunate coincidence. But word of that got out a little bit later, and again, people's reaction was like, you've got to be kidding me, this is dumb. And there was even a rather prominent wrestler who was involved in that event who said, quite frankly, like, you know what, I really wouldn't have any problem with the girls getting in the ring here as part of an event like this. So, the thing is, though, that stuff like this is not an isolated incident. Reading stories and reading other things that by pure coincidence, I'd actually read something about a similar situation where back in like 2000, the governor of Osaka, who at the time was a lady, and governor and mayor, not the same thing. It's kind of a little weird here in Japan on that front. She was at a sumo event and she wanted to present some prizes to some of the winners, but the ceremony was happening in the ring and she was not allowed to present the prize in the ring because she was a woman. So the male deputy, mayor, deputy governor or whatever, he had to do that. Um, so as I've said, the general reaction online here in Japan, and I actually, to take a step back, when I saw people talking about that situation on Twitter, I kind of made a little remark about what happened with the Osaka situation, just kind of add a little additional information and perspective to the whole situation. And oh my God, like the response to that just absolutely exploded. I literally got like 500 likes and a 100 retweets. It's like the biggest thing I've ever put on Twitter. And I mean, for like a couple hours, my phone was just going absolutely nuts. And I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I can only imagine if it was something that really went viral. I mean, at the end of the day, 100 retweets, 500 likes, on Twitter, that's really nothing. But still, it's just wow. But as I was saying, in general, the reaction here in Japan from people here in Japan generally has seemed to be, in both situations, this is really ridiculous, and that not letting little girls into the ring during a sumo event for kids, not getting upset about women going into the ring to try and administer medical aid to someone having a medical emergency. Again, this is ridiculous. The only thing I've seen where anybody seemed to have any real solid objection was a casual passing mention to a few people in the audience at the initial event. And to put it bluntly, it really wouldn't surprise me if those were just some hidebound old men who really just weren't thinking properly. And then, that's kind of the reputation that sumo does kind of have these days, is that it's a declining sport. It's something that's mostly appeals to older men. And, even here in Japan, people have remarked that, a lot of a lot of the really top wrestlers these days aren't even Japanese. A lot of them are Mongolian. Um, There have been Russians, Polynesians, Americans, I believe even. So it just really kind of feels like, at the end of the day, this sort of fading sport where the majority of people who still care about it are very tradition-bound old men who aren't willing to be flexible even in light of reason, which is kind of a habit of old men, but c'est la vie. The real thing that kind of pleases me about the situation is just how pretty much everybody has said, like, acting like this is kind of ridiculous. That said, tradition dies hard. I mean, obviously, not letting someone somewhere during a medical emergency because of their gender is kind of ridiculous. But I'm not really holding any. Wow, I need some water. I'm not really holding any great hope for any substantial change in sumo anytime soon. Again, cultural change to long-standing traditions can sometimes be very rapid, but usually it isn't. And again, the audience for sumo is probably going to continue to continue to be these older men. One of the things that I mentioned, I'd read something about sumo, and that's where I read about the female governor of Osaka not being allowed into the ring during the event. One thing is that they are considering the idea to try and boost the popularity of sumo, of trying to get it made an Olympic sport. The thing about the Olympics is that they have a very firm rule that any sport that is added as an Olympic sport must be open to both genders. And there is legitimately female sumo out there. The thing is, though, it's actually most popular in Europe, of all places, particularly in Eastern Europe. There was a female sumo tournament in Poland some time back, where they had various female wrestlers from all over come and compete, and apparently it was actually dominated by the female sumo wrestlers from Europe. Only one Japanese female wrestler took home any medals in that event. So in some ways, the sumo is kind of branching out a little bit, and yet on the same side, on the flip side of the coin, it's also in some ways still remaining very traditional and declining. So, the sport really does seem to me to be at kind of a crossroads. I don't really see any reason why it can't branch out and become more popular in other countries and around the world. I mean, kendo, for example, has started to catch on in other countries. It's actually extremely popular in Korea, from what I've personally seen. And I know there are places in other countries where you can do that. But if it's going to do that, then it's going to have to make some changes and adapt to the expectations and needs of these other cultures where it would hope to thrive. And one thing is that, generally speaking, those cultures generally are more serious about equal treatment for women. There was a thing I read. It said that of 144 ranked countries in terms of gender equality, Japan was 114th. That's really low on the list. So yeah, Japan definitely has quite a lot of work to do on that front. So there you have it, folks. Just some thoughts about this rather interesting story and the future of Japan, one of Japan's most traditional sports. It's certainly a situation I think that is worth keeping an eye on. So guys, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Gaijin Gaiden. And please also join me on Tumblr at Gaijin Gaiden. Until next time, take care and have a good one.